not travel during the summer to go home to see their families. There were many community members who, Muslims go on pilgrimages to Mecca as part of their religious beliefs, and there were members who decided not to do that, not to travel, because they were scared that they would not be allowed to enter into the country. And these were not just people who were here on a visa. These were people who were green card holders, lawful permanent residents, who decided not to leave the country because they were fearful, they were scared that they would not be able to enter the country. We had a specific instance where a community member had left the country to visit their ailing mother, and right after the first Muslim ban was put into effect, they actually made sure to come back, cut their trip short and come back within 7 days because they were scared that they would not be able to enter the country again. Again, this person was here on their green card as a lawful permanent resident, because there's just a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in the community. I had a small child in one of the anti-bullying sessions raise their hand and ask me if they would have to leave the country. And this is a child born in the U.S., U.S. citizen, born U.S. citizen, who is scared whether after President Trump had taken office, if Muslims and him and his family would have to leave the country. Along with that, we've had a spike in cases of Muslims right after the election. Between the November of 2016, we'd had several Muslims who had traveled recently be approached by the FBI with a list of 7 questions without an attorney present, who were being asked to be interrogated by the FBI. And the only common factor between these individuals were that they were Muslims and that they traveled internationally recently.
And they were not being suspected of any crimes, just simply because of their national origin.
National origin, and the fact that they had traveled specifically to Pakistan. They were being questioned for that reason. And I had actually called one of the FBI agents, and he had given me the 6 questions, and those questions were, just the nature of those questions they were extreme in nature. It was, they didn't indicate any specific suspicious behavior. Those questions were specifically profiling in nature and asking basically what reason there was for these individuals to travel to Pakistan. So we've had a spike in that. We've had a spike in individuals in employment situations being denied religious accommodations, which is your constitutionally protected right in the United States. We've had several mosque incidents across the nation, 63 just from January to July of 2017. We had 63 mosque incidents with mosques being targets of threats, vandalism, or even arson. We had a mosque that was burned down twice since the election, completely burned down. Completely destroyed. In the city of Cincinnati, we've had 5 incidents of threats, vandalism in June of 2016.
In Ohio or in Cincinnati?
In Ohio.
In Ohio.
And in Cincinnati, we had, I believe, 3. We had a bomb threat made to Westchester Mosque in March of 2017. We had a suspicious package with white powder and a threatening note that was sent to Westchester Mosque, again in June of 2017. The Columbus Mosque was vandalized in February of 2016, 2017, yeah, thank you. So just in Ohio as well, we've seen many mosques being vandalized or threats being made against the Muslim community in general. Yeah.
I guess, how troubling do you find this spike, and is this something that you see continuing to get worse as we head into 2018? I mean, we're 4 months into 2018. Where do you see things moving forward?
It's absolutely troubling, especially when I'm working with little kids and they're telling me, whether they're going to have to leave the country, or they're telling me that, their fellow students, or sometimes even their educators, Recently we had a case with the University of Cincinnati where the professor had attacked a student verbally in his class for the student, saying something as simple as, was talking about a song and saying how the song represents unity in the United States and everyone coming together and diversity. and the professor verbally attacking her and saying that she should shut up, and sit down and listen, because at least in the U.S., she's being treated better than she would be treated otherwise in the world, other places in the world. So, solely because she was a Muslim student. So yeah, it is very troubling when things like that are happening. I don't see things changing unless we have our president, stops attacking the Muslim community, stops passing legislation, stop passing laws that target specifically the Muslim community. The latest legislation with the Muslim Ban 3.0 is still in courts. It's going to be heard by the Supreme Court on Wednesday.
One of the cases.
Cases, yeah. So I don't see the targeting of the Muslim community changing anytime soon, unless we have a president who treats everyone, regardless of their faith, equally. And I'm not talking about the attacks that the president has made against the Muslim community via Twitter, with posting inflammatory, links or comments against
and inaccurate information.
Against Muslims. I do not see that changing. The words that we use, whether it's on the campaign trail, on Twitter, in the news, in our living rooms, they have consequences, and that I've seen in the last 2 years in very, direct ways. And it impacts our ability to sustain a society that guarantees equality and dignity for everyone. So unless we have change from the president and other government officials, unfortunately, I do not see this changing.
You guys may have mentioned this before we got in, but the different cases that you guys mentioned, relating it directly back to like the evidence related to the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys kind of revisit what that looks like, what the evidence is that kind of creates that correlation?
Yeah, absolutely. For one thing, as I was saying earlier, we've seen incidents like we've never ever seen before in American history, where the name of the president is being used by individuals in society almost as a weapon, or really as a weapon, to threaten people and to scare them. And so we've seen across the country, and here in the tri-state, we've seen incidents where an individual or group of individuals have attacked someone that is an American Muslim or perceived to be Muslim, using the name Trump, and have threatened them with everything from deportation to death. And that's something we've never ever seen in this country before. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is related to the Muslim bans, and there have been 3 of them so far. And when the first one was struck down by the courts, Trump didn't say, okay, I guess this was a bad idea. No, he doubled down and came out with a second executive order. And when that one was struck down by the courts, he came out with a third one. And so there are lawsuits going on right now, making their way through the courts, that are challenging these Muslim bans, these unconstitutional executive orders that attempt to ban Muslims from coming into this country. And so, we've seen, as Sana mentioned, we've seen incidents of families that have been split apart, people who've been American citizens and people with legal permanent status in this country, afraid to travel, afraid to leave the country, even for a vacation or to go visit family or, anything like that. So these are very real and concrete effects that it's had on people in our community, and not just on the Muslim community, but also on people who are perceived to be Muslim. And we know that the Muslim community is not the only community in this country that's been negatively affected by Trump and by his bigotry, and those who have felt now somehow that it's okay to be very open with their bigotry. There are, many other communities that have suffered as well, but our report is specifically pertaining to the Muslim community. Yeah.
Thank you for reiterating that, because
Yes.
we had to be a little late as well.
Yeah, sure.
As far as what went into actually putting this report together, obviously a lot of hard work, but could you kind of just pinpoint some things that you guys did to make this report come together?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so on a national level, we have chapters in over 30,
We have about 34 chapters right now.
chapters nationwide. So as attorneys, our job is to, every time we get a call, every time we get, we take an intake of
the
calls
request
that we
for
get.
help.
Yeah. And we have a database in which we add all that data, you know, the date that was called, the type of discrimination that it was, whether it was a hate crime or a hate incident, what was it based on, whether it was based on their race or national origin, their religion, all those things. So this is something that we do on a daily basis. So after we gather all this data, each chapter sends that data to Care National in DC, and they consolidate all that data together and make their report. So in Cincinnati, like I was talking about, we had a surge of bullying cases. So all the bullying cases that we've had in Cincinnati, I documented those specific statistics, and I sent them to National, and then Care National was able to get the statistics from all the chapters across the country and put them in the report. So, yeah.
Do you follow up with law enforcement at all in some of these instances to verify if any of them were of a criminal nature? And you also mentioned that some of this discrimination that you found comes at the hands of law enforcement. How do you deal with that? Do you reach out to law enforcement in those instances as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's usually one of the first things that I do. Because, I mean, we work with law enforcement. As an attorney, I work with law enforcement because their job is to protect the public and in the case of federal law enforcement, to investigate crimes. So in any situation where if a person calls me and says my child was bullied and beaten, that's the first thing that I do. I ask them, did you call the police? Because in that case it's assault and the police needs to be contacted. And then it's not only just contacting the police, but making sure that the police do what they have to do. Because a lot of times, oftentimes, more often than not, it's kind of swept under the rug and there's nothing that's done. And sometimes it's because there isn't enough evidence or because it's not followed up on. So that is a part of my job in making sure that local law enforcement, I call them and I make sure that they take proper action and the perpetrators in those given situations, when it's a crime, that it needs to be taken care of. In dealing with federal law enforcement, absolutely, when we get a call from a community member saying that they were contacted by federal law enforcement, of course they're very scared because it's a scary thing, when the FBI shows up at your home, it's scary for most people, or in your place of work, or while you're walking into the mosque, it's scary for most people. It's intimidating. So I do call them, and because it's every person's right to have an attorney present when they're speaking with law enforcement, and they should have an attorney present to protect their rights and to be able to effectively work with law enforcement, but also to protect their rights, which is again your constitutionally protected right. So yeah, I do contact federal law enforcement, and then if it's a legitimate situation and it's not profiling, then yes, I meet with federal law enforcement with my client. Yeah.
And then speaking of law enforcement, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the incident back in 2015, I believe, with the Hamilton County Sheriff's deputy had posted on Instagram talking about, he would kill Muslims and, he was only suspended and then returned to be a deputy. So just kind of your reaction to that, was sufficient, or kind of does that just kind of set a precedent of allowing these types of things to happen?
Yeah, I think it definitely sends a very negative and wrong message to the citizens of Hamilton County. That, if you're a part of, one particular group, and a sheriff's deputy who is there to serve and protect all the citizens of the county posts threatening messages like that and gets away with it, then how is it that people in the community are supposed to trust law enforcement, local law enforcement, when an incident happens and law enforcement needs to be called? It's not something new or different. There's been an issue of trust between communities of color and local police for a very long time, and this is just one more example of that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you guys have and you might have already gone through this, but numbers for our area, just any target numbers? I know that this covers a lot, but some hot ones that would be good to just list off.
Well, overall, our calls for assistance that we get, we keep track of that. In 2015, it was 107. In 2016, it rose to 121. In 2017, it rose to 163. So almost a 35% increase in 1 year, and that's really significant for our area.
We've had a significant or a consistent increase rather over the last few years in hate crimes, hate incidents,
Bias,
just in calls in
bullying,
general. Yeah. The last report that CARE did for 2016, they'd found between 2014 and 2016 there was a 584% surge in hate crimes, and a report done by the FBI actually showed that the level of hate crimes at this point have surpassed the levels that existed after September 11th. So, and that to me, when I read that statistic, I was pretty surprised by that, pretty shocked by that. But yeah, so this is at this point pretty unprecedented, the number of hate crimes that we've had in the country.
And how are you guys able to, like, I guess, distinguish between, you know, something really being identified as hate bias or, you know, that kind of thing, as opposed to something else?
Okay. So when a person is attacked or verbally attacked or physically attacked on the basis of their national origin, race, there's generally some evidence calling out to that, right? And when, so in many cases, law enforcement will just call it like road rage, for example, right? But there are specific incidents where we've had individuals say that there were comments made about, let's say, their headscarf, right, or their appearance. And in cases like that where there's something distinguishing, you know, you being attacked versus someone next to you being attacked, then in that case it becomes a hate crime or a hate incident. It can be difficult, right, because sometimes someone can just try to run you over with your car, and in that case, how do you know if it was just, you know, someone, you know, being hateful towards you or doing it because you were wearing a headscarf? In most of those cases, I think we have to go with the assumption that it was a hate crime, because if someone
bias motivated, at least.
Yeah, because if someone looks a specific way and they're being attacked, in most cases, you know, there are comments attached to it. Because we had a situation where a student near UC was almost run over with a car, and thankfully there were other people there who had, you know, pulled her away from the car. She was almost hit and run over. In that incident, there were comments made at her as this situation was happening. So in most situations that happens, but when it doesn't, we still call law enforcement and report it as a hate crime, because they need to investigate it as such. And if they start off the bat with just seeing it as, oh, it's just road rage or nothing like that, then it usually doesn't go anywhere. So
a lot of times what we see is that there's a reluctance on the part of law enforcement to actually attribute bias as motivation for the crime. And so a lot of times they'll try to just pass it off as, you know, something, I don't want to say normal, but, you know, usual type, like, for instance, road rage. And if we don't have anything outright to pin it on, then it makes it hard for us to push that. But in this case, where this young woman this was in, what, 2015? She was nearly run over. And this was up by UC, you know. You know, the driver was specifically yelling slurs at her. So in that case, that was easy, and there were witnesses.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not always the case.
We've had several cases of Muslim women in a Kroger's parking lot. I don't remember which specific Kroger it was.
A couple of different ones.
Yeah, being followed or you know, having negative comments being yelled at them.
In one incident, the young woman they
grabbed her headscarf.
And tried to pull it off. In another incident, a guy in his SUV tried to run a woman over. And
she was with her son. She was with her, I think, 8-year-old son at that point. So in those instances, there weren't any comments, right? They didn't yell, "You Muslim," or anything like that. However, when someone looks a certain way and they're being attacked,
it's pretty clear.
It's pretty clear that they were attacked for that reason, because I mean, we haven't heard any instances of, you know, other people just randomly walking, and at least in Cincinnati, you know, and they were almost run over, or their hair was grabbed or anything like that. So,
good.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Could you say and spell both of your names?
Yeah. My name is Sana Hassan. I'm the staff attorney for CARE Cincinnati office. It's spelled SANAHASSAN.
And my name is Karen Dabdoub. I'm the Executive Director for CARE Cincinnati, and my name is spelled KarenDabdoub.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much for